Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. First of all, your Chiamo, that means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning African Black people. I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Radnehambata Akan Odwirafo of Aakhuamuman Amaruka Atifi Mu, the Akwamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. Also co-founder of Hoodoo Dine, Hearth Shrine of Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. So, this is our 10th annual Hoodoo Mayn, Hoodoo Nation Festival. And we've been doing this, and we started this process back 10 years ago because, first of all, we want to firmly establish the Akan identity of Hoodoo in North America. But we also looked around and saw in our Nsamanfo, which is the Akan term for Ancestresses and Ancestors, we looked around to see if anybody was conducting any kind of authentic Hoodoo festival a number of years ago before we started this. Of course, our Nsamafo directed us to reestablish this institution. We've always had, annual festivals in our ancestral religious practices and so forth. So we're reestablishing something that goes back not only hundreds of years, but thousands of years. But when we looked around to see what was going on around the country, the only, Hoodoo festival, which was a pseudo Hoodoo festival that was annual, was something that was being conducted by one of the whites and their offspring, which of course they are incapable of practicing hoodoo or any form of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African ancestral religious practice whatsoever. So, of course, we reestablished HOODOO MAYN. The term Mayn in the Akan language means nation. So HOODOO MAYN means the Hoodoo Nation. So, what we're going to start off with today is we want to talk about, well, first and foremost, let me show you this. Give me 1 second. First, I want to take you to our Voodoo page on the website. Okay, so when you see the flyer here, we're going to get into all of this information. But you see this Akua doll. This is not Akua doll. Which in our Akan tradition, the Akua doll, the so-called fertility doll, is a sacred ritual talisman. It's governed by the divinity Akua, female divinity. This is one Akua doll that we reclaimed. It was found in Virginia in the so-called 1700s, carved by one of our ancestresses, and we were able to reclaim that. So that's part of our shrine house and so forth, part of Voodoo Dine. But you see the blood platelets and you see the Mara Mountains from Sudan and so forth. We're talking about spiri-genetic inheritance, transcarnational inheritance, inheriting our cultures spiri-genetically through successive reincarnations, which is the term Debra in Akan, which means reincarnation, returning through the womb and so forth, through successive reincarnations, through specific blood circles. So when we say we have a spiri-genetic inheritance or a transcarnational inheritance, that means that whoever we were before enslavement began, we are still those people now. So before enslavement began, you were living somewhere on the continent hundreds of years ago. You were living as part of a group. You were living as part of a clan and so forth. You were living in a specific area. You're speaking a specific language, engaged in ritual practices and so forth. And at some point, either yourself or your descendants were taken from West Africa, West Africa, or Central or South, even some East or West or North and so forth, and forced into the Western Hemisphere and forced into enslavement and so forth. When we arrived on these shores in the Western Hemisphere, of course, we continued. We knew our language, we knew our ritual practices. We would speak that to one another, in closed quarters and so forth. under the cover of night and so forth. Many of us would escape and establish our own independent sovereign states, but we knew our culture, knew our religion, knew our language, and continued to practice these elements of our culture and passed it down to our children. Even when our children were taken away from us and sent to other plantations and so forth, some of them maintain these traditions. So when some of us hundreds of years later reincarnate through our descendants, we're the exact same. If you're an Asante or an Akwamu or a Denchara warrior or warrioress, and you saw your descendant take it into North America, and you transitioned on the continent, and one of your descendants, one of your children or grandchildren were taken into North America and enslaved, when they poured libation in North America and called on your spirit, and you had transitioned on the continent, you're an ancestral spirit now. You're watching them grow and develop in North America during enslavement. You come to them as an ancestor, ancestress. You help guide them so they can free themselves from enslavement, learn how to pick herbs from that region of the Earth Mother's body to heal themselves and protect themselves and also poison the so-called slave master. You will watch them generation after generation. And some of them may have lost knowledge of the culture on the surface, but some of them will continue to communicate with their ancestresses and ancestors when they could. They will pour libation in some way and somewhere and so forth in a hidden location. You will come to them in dreams. You will come to them during ritual practice, during meditation and so forth. And at some point, it's time for you to reincarnate hundreds of years later. And when your great-great-great-great-granddaughter grows up and gets married and copulates with her husband, she pulls your spirit into the womb for the first time in 300 years. And even though physiologically there was some blood mixture, on the plantation, blood mixture after enslavement was over and so forth from different groups and so forth, but you're the same spirit that is reincarnated. And even though the blood may be mixed, the soul is not. This is why we say, "Wotumi fra mboja nso nanso wotumi mfra okra okra." You can mix blood, but you cannot mix the soul. So if you're an Akwamu warrior or an Akwamu warrioress, you're that same Akwamu warrior, warrioress whose spirit has reincarnated hundreds of years later through the blood circle, and now you're born in North America for the first time in hundreds of years. You're the same spirit. Your body may be a little bit lighter brown because of the blood mixture that took place, but you're the same spirit that's reincarnated. And you have the same culture. You're still connected to those Akan ancestresses and ancestors. You're still connected to divinities. You're still connected to those ritual practices. Hold on one second. I want to make sure is the sound good? Just want to make sure we have everything's good.
The sound is good.
Okay. Okay, and we're gonna have a break for questions in a minute. Just want to introduce a few concepts before. Now, one thing I want to start off talking about, and the reason we opened it up in that way is because this notion of syncretism, people talk about hoodoo, and they talk about it as an amalgamation of different ritual practices from different Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit African ethnic groups, and they all pull together and put together a different tradition. And some of them will say it's rooted in the Congo or rooted in the Mende or rooted in the Ebe or Yoruba and so forth. That is totally inaccurate. People didn't know the source culture from which hoodoo came. They didn't even know that the word hoodoo is an Akan term. The source culture, of course, is Akan. When Akan people were forced into North America, we continued Akan Ancestral Religion under the Akan word undu, which means medicine from roots, trees, and plant life. Undu also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession and spirit communication. It also means to feel a presentiment of foreboding, to see what's unfolding in the spirit realm, to make ritual adjustments so you can address specific issues. So undu in the Akan language was corrupted into hoodoo, or just pronounced differently as hoodoo in North America. We're going to go into detail about different aspects of that, but this notion that things were just an amalgamation of different groups throwing different pieces together to make up a tradition, totally inaccurate, pushed mainly by white writers who were writing about hoodoo, and then some Black people repeating that false information. and especially repeating the false information about what ethnic group Hoodoo came from. Now, we want to talk about syncretism. We're going to look at one of the articles we published for our Etchy Sign conference, and we'll pull this together. Now, okay. So we're going to check this out, and then we're going to talk about and discuss the film that we released on the Hoodoo tradition. As we mentioned in the flyer, we want to talk about that part of our panel discussion, talking about the different aspects of the film that we released on Hoodoo last October. So, but first, this is an article we published in the Etchy Sign Journal. We have a conference. Not only do we have the Hoodoo MAYN Hoodoo Nation conference, which focuses specifically on the Hoodoo religion, which is Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. That's always in October. In March, around the spring equinox, we have the Etchy Sign Conference. And let me just show you the page for that. And in the Etchy Sign Conference, we talk about ancestral religion in North America, but we talk about the various expressions of ancestral religion preserved in North America, not just the Hoodoo tradition, which is Akan, but also the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition, Orisha tradition, the Voodoo tradition, which is Ewe, the Wanga tradition, which is Ovambo, the Ngengang tradition, which is the Fang tradition, the Gola and Kisi traditions, Gola and Gichi and so forth, and the various traditions. We bring different people from different groups to speak on and teach about their respective traditions. Now, we published a journal for Etchy Sign. This was last year's conference flyer and so forth. But when we first had the conference, and last March was the 9th annual conference, we published a journal each year for each conference for the first 3 years. And let me just show you, these are the 31 books I've published to date, and some of them are the Etchy Sign books. So I'm just going to scroll down real quick. So you see 13,016, which is 2016. Of course, we use 13,000. We're in the mix of a 26,000 year astronomical cycle called the Afuraitkaitnut, the Great Year. Of course, the fictional cartoon character Jesus never existed of any race or any form, so we don't track time based on a fictional character, a fraudulent character. So it's not 2016 or 2024, it's 13,025 for us because the new year began in September. So, but in this journal, and these are all free downloads, all 31 of our books are free downloads. We published this specific article, and let's get into it. It's called Notes on Hoodoo, Juju, Gris Gris, Voodoo, Wanga, and Ngengang. And it says, subtitled, Akan, Yoruba, Bambara, Fon, Ewe, Ovambo, and Fang Ancestral Religion in North America. We are showing here the etymology of the names of these different traditions and tracing them back to their source ancestral ethnic group. Each one of these names not only represent the tradition, but they also identify the ethnic group that brought the tradition with them, the ethnic group that brought that ancestral religion with them. So in North America, we did not lose our ancestral religious practice or our traditions. We continued them and we identified them by the name of the tradition. So in the first portion, we talk about the term hoodoo. And we quote from our book, Hoodoo People here. You see here it says, and we were showing, as a matter of fact, the relationship between Akan and ancient Khanate and Kemet, Nubian and Egypt and so forth. But the Akan term undu in the Akwamu dialect, and then the Asante dialect is unduru. So these are two different Akan, sub-Akan groups. The Asante is a large Akan group, subgroup. The Akwamu, which is what our ethnic group is a large Akan group. The Akan people are the largest group in Ghana and Ivory Coast. There are about 26 million Akan people between Ghana and Ivory Coast in West Afuraitkaitnut, West Africa, one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent and one of the largest from which people were brought into North America. So, but there are different dialects. So in the Akwamu dialect, the term undu means medicine from roots, trees, and plant life and so forth. In the Asante dialect, they pronounce it unduru, unduru. But in Akwamu, we say undu, and it's the Akwamu dialectical variant that was preserved in North America as undu, later pronounced hoodoo, and so forth. So undu meaning medicine, undunu, as well as undun in ancient Kemet means medicine, undua or undria, trees, plants, roots, undu, trees, plants, roots in ancient Kemet. So what we're saying is that the undu, the medicine for the root work and conjure and so forth, comes from the undua, the roots, the trees, the plant life. And we have a whole list, and we'll just show you this in the book. In our book, Hoodoo People, we go into this information in detail. And this is what we were quoting from. So we show that do, and then it's also duru, aduru in the Asante dialect, but do, plural, undu, do is singular, undu is plural, and so forth. Powder, medicine, drug, and so forth. This is from the Akan dictionary that was published in the late 1800s and so forth by individuals going into the Akan areas in the so-called mid-1800s and sitting with the people and compiling a dictionary of the Akan language. So, do, singular, undu, plural. Medicine from roots, trees, and plant life, and so forth. Unduru, singular, eduru, plural, unduru. In the Asante dialect, the same definition. We show that in ancient Kemet, it's udun, and we can prove it's undun, fat, grease, medicine, and so forth. But then you have dua, to plant, edua, plant, tree, shrub. And you can see here, it says in for plural, so that's undua, also pronounced undria, but undua is the plant, the trees, plant life, and so forth, the roots. The undu, the medicine, comes from the undua. There's a direct relationship phonetically, linguistically, as well as cosmologically. And then we show the same terms, ut and udu in ancient Kemet, meaning plants and trees and so forth. So we go through an entire linguistic breakdown, the odun scene, the stump of a tree and so forth. Odun sinifo is the root doctor. Odwirafo is the root worker. Odumafo is the, diviner and so forth. Odutofo, the one who makes the poison to kill the enemies. So we show that the Odu, Mafo, Udu, Yefo, Udu, Tofo, Udu, Sinfo. These are different ritual practitioners with Undu as their name, the Undu people. We continue to call ourselves Undu people in North America. So we go through a great deal of information in this book showing all these different, definitions. And then we also show in ancient Kemet, Undu also means medicine. Undu also means to become heavy with the spirit. Undu also means an altar where you place, ritual offerings on the shrines. And we show in the Medutu specific texts that lay that out, that actually use the term undu in referencing medicine and ritual offerings on shrines. And we even lay that out in the Medutu in the hieroglyphs to prove that. So, but this all started when we first wrote the article that we put in the appendix here. Akan origin of the term hoodoo. And we first wrote that article 14 years ago. And that's the seminal article from which people began to learn that it is Akan people who established undu or hoodoo in North America. And then we expanded upon that and, put that in the book. So we talk about that in the first part of this article. So we're showing that not only is the term Undu meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life, root workers, conjurers, and so forth, but it also means to become heavy with the spirit, to feel a presentiment of foreboding, to see what's unfolding in the spirit realm so you can make ritual adjustments, to realign yourself with order and so forth. Not only is it a term for the ritual practice, the most prominent expression of the ritual practice of Akan Ancestral Religion in North America is when we made medicine to heal ourselves, but also to poison and kill our enemies, the slavers, so we can escape the plantations and build up our, establish our independent sovereign states. So the most powerful expression of Akan Ancestral Religion was the expression of Undu. And you'll see that same theme running throughout various groups on the, in North America. The most powerful expression of their ancestral religion is that expression of that part of the tradition that they use to protect themselves, heal themselves, as well as protect themselves. So not only are we saying, if you're saying you're a hoodoo man or hoodoo woman, we were also saying, when we first were forced over here, I am an Akan man, I'm an Akan woman. If you heard someone say, I'm a hoodoo man, I'm a hoodoo woman, they were also identifying themselves specifically as an Akan man or Akan woman from the Akan ethnic group. And everybody knew that. Next case, next term, Juju. We hear the term Juju. That's actually a term from the Yoruba language, the Yoruba people in Southwest Nigeria, largest ethnic group in Nigeria and so forth, one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent and so forth. Well, of course, one of the largest ethnic groups from whom many of us, our people, were taken and brought into the Western hemisphere. So Juju is a Yoruba term. It means to cast or to throw, talking about throwing medicine, casting medicine, energy, and so forth for our healing, but also for protection. So we show in the language of ancient Kemet, do or Ju. It can mean to give, but it also means to pray or praise, ritual incantation, ritual provocation. And we show the ritual movements when they put the hands this way and project energy that way. They're casting or throwing or projecting and so forth. And that is do or Ju. But when they talk about bad thing, evil, wickedness, and so forth, they'll also associate Juju with something bad or evil or wicked, but it's really not. We're utilizing the energy to poison. Yeah, poison is bad for the person you're poisoning, but if they're your enemy, it's good for you. So Juju meaning to throw, to cast, whether it's medicine or ritual incantations and so forth. It means the same thing in ancient Kemet, to throw, to cast, to project, ritual provocation. So when people in the Western Hemisphere, North America specifically said, I'm a Juju man or a Juju woman, yes, they were talking about, I'm the one who makes the Juju, makes the medicine, makes the ritual, offerings and so forth to defend and heal ourselves, but attack our enemies and so forth. They were not only talking about their ritual practice, but they were also identifying their ethnic group. If they said, I'm a Juju man or Juju woman, they were also saying, I'm a Yoruba man, I'm a Yoruba woman. So Yoruba people maintain the Orisha tradition in North America as Juju. So the Juju tradition is the Orisha tradition, the Yoruba tradition in North America, just as Hoodoo is the Akan ethnic group and Akan ancestral religion in North America. The term Gris Gris is a Bambara term brought to North America by the Bambara people. There are many Bambara people in Mali, for example, major ethnic group there. They're part of the larger Mendi ethnic group and so forth. You have some populations in Senegal, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and so forth. Now, if you look at the term Gris Gris, you hear the term like Gris Gris bags and so forth, used as talismans for protection, healing, ritual provocation, repelling negative energy, and also medicine to heal yourself, but also to kill the enemy. People making Gris Gris bags and all of that. Now, Of course, once again, we show that the term Gris Gris, you look in the language of ancient Kemet, this is Ger and it's Ger, but it's really Gris Gris, to destroy, to demolish, a burnt sacrifice offering, and Coptic is Grir. You also see it says a strip of cloth, a rag. This is a Bambara hunter wearing Gris Gris talismans in Mali. This is Gris Gris bags in North America and so forth. So when the Bambara people came over and other Mindi-speaking people came over and so forth, they continued their ritual practice. If you heard someone say, I'm a Gris Gris man or a Gris Gris woman, and they're making Gris Gris bags and so forth, originally, they were not only talking about their ritual practice, how they healed themselves and defended themselves against the enemy, they were also saying, I am a Bambara man, I'm a Bambara woman, I'm a Mindi man, I'm a Mindi woman. They were identifying their ethnic group. All of us preserved our ethnic group. We didn't lose knowledge of our ethnic group as soon as we got off the boat. We were still understood our language. We still understood our ethnicity and so forth. We still understood our ritual practices, and we passed that on. And once again, the most expressive and a powerful expression of Bambara ancestral religion in North America is the aspect of the tradition that we use to heal ourselves and also kill our enemies, poison our enemies. So Bambara people, instead of saying, hey, I'm a Bambara man and I practice Bambara ancestral religion, you'll say, I'm a Bambara man, Bambara woman, I practice Gris Gris, because that's the part of our religion we use to protect and defend ourselves. Vodun or Voodoo in the Ewe language, as well as the Fong, and the Ewe and Fong people live in Togo and Benin primarily, some also in Ghana, some in Nigeria and so forth, or maybe Togo and Benin. And when Voodoo was brought into North America, initially by the Ewe, who were in the Aja Empire before it was invaded and became a later part of the Dahomean Empire, but the Ewe people brought Vodou or Voodoo into North America. That was over 100 years before the Haitian Revolution. We're talking about the 12,700s, the so-called 1700s. Many people associate voodoo, for example, in Louisiana with the migration of Haitians into that region after the, war in Haiti. But over 100 years before the Haitian Revolution, voodoo was already in North America and was brought directly from the continent into North America by Ewe-speaking people. And later some Fon people came as well. But there was always already a voodoo tradition. So the voodoo tradition in North America is not in any way dependent on Haitians coming into Louisiana. So, so we talk about in Fong Bay, for example, Vodun meaning to rest and draw water, Vo and Dun. And then we show Wo Dun in ancient Kemet, basically identifying the exact same thing. We show it in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs and so forth. But the important part about this, and when you read through that, you'll see the details linguistically and cosmologically. But the key point is when someone said, I'm a voodoo man or voodoo woman, they were also identifying their ethnic group as an Ewe man, Ewe woman for those people who came first. And then the related Fong ethnic group, they came along as well. And if you said a voodoo man, voodoo woman, you're saying, I'm an Ewe man, Ewe woman, or a Fong man, Fong woman, and so forth, preserving our ethnic groups once again. Now, you're here in North America as well as parts of Central America and other places, but in North America specifically, you'll read these stories by ethnographers back in the late 1800s, early 1900s and onwards, and they would talk about ritual healers amongst the Gullah population, Gullah and Geechee population along the Gullah Geechee corridor, and they say they practice Wanga, and they're throwing the Wanga and the Wanga man and the Wanga woman and so forth. So the Ovambo people, mainly in northern Namibia and southern Angola and South Afuraitkaitnut, South Africa. Then one of the various ethnic groups were brought into North America and so forth. Many of us are descended from Ovambo people. Now, you have Gullah and Geechee people who come from the Gola and Kisi people of Sierra Leone in the western part of the continent. So Gullah and Geechee, it's Gola and Kisi. But you also have further south in the southwest part of the continent, the region called Angola, which is from Ngola. And there's a relationship between Ngola, that terminology, as well as the Gola people up in Sierra Leone. Now, the Ovambo people in the region of Angola, in their language, the term Wanga is descriptive, as we say, of ritual practices of healing, protection, empowerment, and spirit communication. Of course, the whites and offspring would say Wanga is witchcraft and so forth. But once again, we're utilizing our energetic force to heal ourselves, but also to poison, to kill our enemies. So you'll see the term spelled Wanga with a W, Wanga, Owanga with the O, and so forth, various ways. In the Ovambo dialect, you'll see it spelled various ways as well. Wanga or Owanga, Owanga, various pronunciations. Of course, we show in the language of Kemet, Onga, and the various definitions. You see Onga, to nail dry pegs into something, to beat, to hammer, to be hot, to burn, to be burned, a kind of drink, a medicine, kind of unguent. A seed of the same plant, shrub, a substance used in making a sacrifice. So, and then we show linguistically in the, due to the hieroglyphs and so forth, how the terms are pronounced as Onga. And when you see that, that's the origin of the term Owanga, Owanga. When they talk about driving nails into a substance and talking about utilizing Onga for burnt sacrifice and ritual offerings and medicine and so forth, this is from the people of the region. They drive nails into these ritual sculptures for healing, for protection, for divination, and various things. You look at that, you see Ovambo people using, these kind of ritual figures and so forth for ritual purposes. And then you look all the way back to ancient Kemet, and the same term, Wanga. This is, we'll have a Wanga doll, just like you have a voodoo doll, you have a hoodoo doll, baby, you have a Wanga doll and so forth. In North America, this is one of those original Wanga dolls from the continent and so forth. When you're sticking pins in the Wanga doll, we were sticking nails in the wooden Wanga doll on the continent. We had to modify when we came to North America. So you see a voodoo doll or a Wanga doll in cloth and sticking pins in it, same thing. But that goes all the way back to the term in ancient Kemet, Onga, to nail, to drive pegs into something, to beat hammer and so forth, but also substance, ritual medicine, all of that. And then you have the Fang people. This is a Fang sculpture from, the Fang people live primarily in Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Cameroon, as well as part of the Republic of Congo and so forth, but mainly Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Cameroon. Many of our people were taken from those regions and brought into North America and so forth. So we continued Fang ancestral religion. Those of us who are descended from them, that's where we're descended. Hold on one second. Okay, and we're going to take a question right after I finish this last one on the Fang people. So you see the term Ki in ancient Kemet, exalted one, a name for a divinity, Ki, the winged sun disk, Ki, a title of Ra, the creative power and so forth. And you see the solar disk, the circle with the dot in the middle, divine living energy, Ki representing the creative power, the divine solar, fire, life force energy moving throughout all created entities and so forth. Well, the term Ki in the Fang religion and practice means life force energy, or the living energy circulating throughout all naturally created entities. So that title, Ki of Ra, the creator, divine living energy, is later called Ki and Chi in China, which was brought by our people and picked up by, the Chinese and other Asians later. But Ki, a title of Ra in ancient Kemet, also pronounced Chi, is original. The Asians took that later and pretended like they came up with it. but ki also is life force energy in the Fang language. If you look at the term Nganga amongst the Bakongo people as a ritual healer and so forth, you'll see that the term is slightly different in the Fang language, even though the languages are, Niger-Congo languages, quote unquote, are related. They say Ngengang, Ngengang, and you even hear now when people say gang, gang, and so forth. We've been saying that for thousands of years. It's talking about a ritual healer and ritual practice. If a person is in gang and so forth, they're talking about I'm a Fang person, Fang man, Fang woman. That was our original association. We show in ancient Kemet the Gangang Ur, meaning the great Ganga, or the Nganga Ur, the great Nganga. So that's not Neg Ur, it's really Nganga Ur. That's Nganga. Amongst the Bakongo, it's Ngengang or Ngengang amongst the Fang. So we show the etymology there and show the same term, ritual invocations and so forth, as you find in the Fang language. So when you read through that, you'll see all those details and so forth. The key is the Ngengang man or the Ngengang man or Ngengang woman was also identifying themselves not only through their ritual practice, but also as a Fang man, a Fang woman. So the most important takeaway from that particular article is something that flies in the face of the misinformation that's propagated not only by white writers, but even some of our own people. Some of our own people actually believe that we didn't preserve our traditions. People preserve their traditions in Haiti, in Cuba, in South America, and Brazil and so forth. But when it comes to Black people in North America, they want to believe that we didn't preserve anything. If Haitian Voodoo was preserved, if Candomblé in Brazil was preserved, if Lucumi in Cuba was preserved and so forth, and Comfa in Guyana, we want to believe because of an inferiority complex that we didn't preserve anything in North America, we didn't have any tradition. So therefore, the only way we can practice ancestral religion is we have to visit people in the Caribbean, visit people in South America, visit people on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut, get initiated by them, be given traditions by them, and then we bring it back to North America. Then we can say we're legitimized because we went somewhere outside of our close ethnic group to go get something and bring it back because we were just empty vessels and we didn't preserve anything. That's totally 100% fraudulent. We preserved our ancestral religions intact. We preserved them, preserved linguistic terms and so forth, the ritual practice, and most importantly, we preserved our priesthoods and priestesshoods intact, and we continue to initiate people in our priesthoods and priestesshoods intergenerationally up until this very moment. So the hoodoo man or hoodoo woman is the Akan priest and priestess in North America. The Juju man and Juju woman is the Yoruba priest and priestess in North America. The Voodoo man and Voodoo woman is the Ewe priest and priestess in North America. The Wanga man, Wanga woman is the Ovambo priest and priestess in North America. The Ngengang man and Ngengang woman is the Fang priest and priestess in North America. Everything has been preserved when we look inside our spiri-genetic blood circles. So just to wrap up that portion before we take some questions and then get into the analysis of the film. And let me just show this image. Okay. So you see this poster for our first documentary film that we released a few years ago, Amaruka Atifi Mu, African American Ancestral Divination. And you will see that myself, I was representing the Hoodoo tradition in North America, Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, representing the Voodoo tradition in North America, Seshat Tut Ankwajet, representing the Ovambo tradition in North America, Rekit Kajarania Ya Nebet, representing the Fang tradition in North America, Mama Mawusi Ashakir, representing the Juju tradition in North America, and so forth. So different parts of the country in Ohio and Georgia and Florida and New Orleans and Chicago and so forth. We went to the different places and, we're talking about our ritual practices and how our forms of divination were preserved for hundreds of years in North America. Now, we talked about the Etchi Sign Conference and how we would bring these traditions together once a year. And they participated in the first Etchi Sign Conference 10 years ago. We bring people together. So if I'm hosting a conference and it's not just about hoodoo, like the HOODOO MAYN Festival is specifically about hoodoo, but Etchi Sign Conference, all the various traditions coming together. So if I host a conference and I'm practicing the hoodoo tradition and I see someone who practices voodoo, I say, hey, come on and, bring your traditions well. Somebody's practicing juju, come bring your tradition and so forth. That unity and that practice, when we come together communally, we've always done that even on the continent. If somebody was, in an Akan village and you had a visitor from, the Yoruba or even the Wida in Benin, an Ewe person from Wida in Benin, and they came to visit. If the Akan people are engaged in ritual practice and they're pouring libation and drumming and so forth, and then their friend comes from Benin, they'll say, hey, we have a special guest here. This is someone from Benin. They come in, and after we pour libation in the Akan language and engage in ritual drumming and so forth, we'll invite them to come and pour libation in their language so people can see what they do and have their own form of ritual drum and dance and so forth. And we practice together. We do the same thing over here. We'll invite people to ritual. I've been invited to Yoruba rituals and so forth, where people are worshiping the Orisha. If they see me come in, then they'll say, hey, well, you want to do something ritual in the Akan tradition, and we'll pour libation in the Akan language to the Abosom and Samafu and so forth. I've done that where we had events and we'll bring someone who's practicing Yoruba tradition or Vodou tradition and so forth, and we take turns. I pour libation in Akan, they pour libation in Yoruba, the other person pours libation in Ewe and so forth, and we work together like that. We've always done that for hundreds of years, even thousands of years, and even when people end up marrying from different ethnic groups, the children will have, two different lineages, depending on what side they reincarnated from. That'll be the main practice, but they will also preserve practices from the other parent as well. Of course, since we do that naturally, that didn't stop when we were forced into enslavement. When we were forced over here, of course, when we could break free and set up our own independent sovereign state in the swamps and forests, we're different ethnic groups. But if I went and poured libation, we're in our sovereign state now. We're in the swamp and dismal swamp in Virginia and so forth, for example. We have our own settlement. We're defending it. We're growing food. We're, fighting off any enslavers who try to come into our settlement and drag us back into enslavement. We're living intergenerationally as an independent, sovereign, maroon state or nation and so forth. But since there are a number of different groups, people would take turns. We pour libation in Akan, the other person pour libation in Yoruba, the other person pour libation in Bakongo and Gola and Kisi and so forth. And we worship together, but we don't lose our identity. That would be absurd. This idea that hoodoo is an amalgamation of different traditions because we lost knowledge of our tradition. And therefore, we just took different elements of different traditions and merged them together and then decided to call the whole thing hoodoo. And therefore, hoodoo has elements of all these different traditions. Is totally false. It's based on ignorance. It's also based on a deeply seated inferiority complex that was woven into us in a negative way to make us believe that we didn't preserve anything. In reality, yes, we did worship together, but we had our identity. We didn't lose our identity when an Akan person, Yoruba person, Ewe person, Fang person began to worship together. We did that in order to maintain our identities and to compare and contrast and show the differences and the commonalities between different traditions. So that's very important. So when you hear people talking about Hoodoo as an amalgamation of different traditions, they just don't understand, number one, that the Akan ethnic group is the source of Hoodoo, is the Hoodoo tradition. And number two, they didn't understand that we preserved our traditions intergeneration. Okay, so we had a couple of questions. I just wanted to get through that first section. Okay. Tiffany, you had a hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So yes, I wanted
to. Your sound went out. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say we were a powerful people before we were forced to the West. So why didn't we just use our power to not have to be forced to the West? Why do we allow ourselves to be forced and then start tapping into our power after we were forced into the West?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that question. We did a whole broadcast on that because sometimes it's put forward that we were just helpless and the White offspring just drug us into enslavement and we were kicking and screaming and couldn't do anything. We prayed to our deities and it didn't work. And in reality, that never happened.
Okay.
So what actually happened was some of our people, even before, Europeans came to the western part of the continent. For example, our people, when we migrated from ancient Khanit and Kemet, Nubia, and some of us migrated west and reestablished ourselves in the western part of the continent, the ancient empire of Ghana over 2,000 years ago, we reestablished our Akan civilization. So we were the ancient empire of Akara, which is called ancient Ghana and so forth. We established our civilization. Over 1,000 years later, then you had Muslim invasions. And then corruption sets in, and some of our people are dealing with corruption, engaging in corruption, and some of us are not. And some of us were like, you know what, we're not going to participate with them. Some of our people moved further south and left that portion of, West Afuraitkaitnut and moved further down to the forest belt where Ghana and Ivory Coast are now. But then there were also some of the people who wanted to engage in corruption. So we were at war with them. We have been at war with them for hundreds of years. Now, if you're looking at Akan civilization, the Muslims are a very small percentage now, but they were about 12%, but even before they were much smaller than that. But there was war between groups because some people wanted to engage in that corruption and some people did not. Some people wanted to trade with the enemy, the whites and their offspring, from, Arabia and so forth. And some of our people didn't, so it created friction and we were at war with one another, killing one another and so forth. And that was happening primarily because of some people wanting to incorporate, that kind of corruption. So by the time the European comes along, some of us were at war with one another in neighboring groups. And you also had some people who were at war because of succession disputes. So say you have a nation being ruled by a king, and then the king dies, and then there are two candidates to be the next Ohini, the next king. And some people want one person from one clan to become the king, and some people want the next person, and then it becomes a war. We've had that happen for thousands of years periodically, but we resolved it amongst ourselves. What happened with the European is they showed up on the coast and they waited for us to be at war with one another, which would happen every now and then, every few hundred years. It wasn't constant, but every few hundred years there will be a war. Just like here in North America, there's not, you have World War I, World War II, Vietnam, but you don't typically have wars every single year. For us, maybe every 100 years or so forth, there may be a war like that. They will wait to see who's going back and forth. And instead of taking the prisoners of war, that normally if you have a prisoner of war, you have two options. If you're at war with somebody, you capture a prisoner, you can hold them, you can kill them, or you can eventually release them back to the other side. So you either imprison them or you kill them. When the whites and their offspring showed up, they were too weak to come into the continent and enslave us and so forth. They couldn't even survive the mosquitoes. They couldn't even survive the heat. They had to wait on the coast, wait for us to be at war with one another, then when we had prisoners of war, now we had three options. We could either kill the prisoner, which we didn't typically want to do because that would create all kinds of problems with the deceased spirit if it was a wrong thing and so forth. You could imprison them for a long period, which economically that was a problem for your clan at some point, your nation at some point. Now you had a third option. There was this little group of white, weak, melanin recessive individuals who said, hey, we'll trade commodities for your prisoners. If you give us prisoners, we'll give you some of these commodities that we brought from the north and from the east and the Orient and so forth. We didn't mind giving away some of our people, which was misguided. If somebody invaded your village and burned down some of your homes and killed some of your people and you captured them and imprisoned them, you could either kill them or you can sell them to this enemy and get a number of goods, including gunpowder and other things and so forth. And so that's what was happening. They waited for us to have prisoners of war, and then they purchased the prisoners of war. They were not strong enough to come into the continent and, with a military and overtake us. The Europeans showed up in the so-called 1400s, 1471, in the region of Ghana, for example. By 1482, they set up a trading post, and they would come from Europe to the trading post, which later will become a dungeon. But first it was a trading post. They would bring their goods from Europe. We would come from the interior, bring our goods, and there would be an exchange. It was like, quote unquote, shopping mall, so to speak. That was in 1482. The Europeans didn't take over in the region of Ghana until the 1880s. So they were there from the 1480s all the way to the 1880s, before enslavement began, all the way through enslavement, and after enslavement was over. 1888, the Fanti submitted to the British and so forth, and they united with the British and came up under their protection. And then in 1901, the British, along with the Fanti and other groups, banded together to fight against the Asante Empire, and they defeated the Asante Empire after a number of wars that they lost against the Asante. But that final war, they won because the Asante had gone into a civil war because of a succession dispute, and they were split. And then they were defeated, and they were annexed in 1901 into 1902. But the Europeans have been there since 1480, 1471. They were not able to take over at all until 1901, and that's because we had a succession dispute and our people were split. And that's the case all over the continent. The Europeans didn't take over until the 1880s, the Berlin Conference, and they carved up the continent and so forth. But it was always based on us being at war. They're waiting for our prisoners of war to be sold to them so they could capture them. But they were never able to be strong enough to ride up into the continent, beat us down, snatch our people, and take us away. That never happened. On the flip side, when you look at the Barbary Coast, quote unquote, slave trade, all throughout North Africa, Southern Europe, and into the Near East, like in Turkey and so forth, Black people who are called Moors, along with Arabs and so forth, they were enslaving white Christians from the 16th century and 15th and 16th century into the 18th and 19th century for hundreds of years. Over 1 million whites were snatched up from Southern Europe, placed in boats, and sold throughout, the Ottoman Empire. So you see these, if you Google white slaves and the Barbary Coast slave trade, during the same time that enslavement was happening to us in the Western Hemisphere, white Christians, they were even told not to build homes by the coast because the Barbary pirates would come and invade your, nations and snatch you up and enslave you. Now, for those of us who got caught up in Islam, that fake tradition, we were going along with what the Arabs were doing. So you have Black Moors as well as white Arabs and so forth, and Turks and so forth, and they were enslaving white Christians and sending them all throughout, the Ottoman Empire. That's foolishness. We should have just, exterminated them, but some of us were caught up in that fake religion and we were participating. So while they were being enslaved by 1 to 2 million people for hundreds of years, at the same time, when they could capture some of us through purchasing our prisoners of war, they would enslave. And just like today, if someone breaks in your house and shoots up some people, and then you call the police and they go to jail, and now they're working as basically a slave in jail for these corporations, that person who broke into your home, you don't mind giving them over to the enemy. They just killed your mother, brother, sister, and so forth. You don't mind giving them over to the enemy, and whatever the enemy does to them, you don't care because they attacked you. And some of us took that position. Some of us did not, and they never traded with the whites and offspring, but some of our people, you know, they did that. They took the prisoners of war who had invaded their nations and sold them to, because that they considered them their enemy. They just tried to set your entire village on fire. You captured them, they are warrior, you sold them to the European, and whatever happened to them on the other side just happened to them on the other side because that was your enemy anyway. So that's what really happened. But there was never this situation where we were just, you know, peacefully practicing our ancestral religion. They showed up in the continent, started beating us down, and we just kept praying and it didn't work. That never happened.
Okay, thank you so much. That answers my question.
Okay, no problem. Okay, I think, Jojo, you had your hand up earlier.
All right, I got like a two-part question, I guess. Is it correct that each individual population has specific patron and matron deities?
You mean in the context of for a group or a clan, or you're talking about individuals?
Well, like for the Ovambo people, if one of their major expressions is driving nails into a statue, that suggests Heru Badet, right?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So, right.
Yeah, so everybody would have, there's going to be, well, just for as far as patron and matron of patriclan and matriclan divinities, everybody's going to have some expression in their own culture, but some expression. So when we're talking about, and Jojo was talking about patriclan and matriclan of patron and matron, the sperm cell and the ovum cell, of course, unite to create the child, but the energy that animates the sperm cell, energy that animates the ovum cell, that is the patriclan divinity and matriclan divinity, and that governs people from those different patriclans and matriclans. So yes, everybody has their own expression of that. Everybody has, you know, like driving the nails into the, you know, figure. Everybody has the divinity of war and iron, and everybody has their own, you know, name for that. Like he's Ikenga in Igbo, he's Ogu in Vodun, Ogun in Yoruba, Bena in Akan, Heru Bedeti in ancient Khmer, Heru Bedet, and so forth. Same divinity. And if you look for the iron divinity, who's the divinity of war and iron and hot metal and so forth, every group is going to have, you know, a name for that because that's a force in creation. Governs the thermosphere and so forth, ionosphere on Earth, the metal in Earth and so forth, the spiritual force that's operant within the metal. Everybody has a name for that. But yeah, everybody's going to have, they have different clan structures, but everybody's going to have specific forces that govern or dominate the patriclan and matriclan.
So does that suggest that Heru Badet has a greater degree of regulation over them than other deities, or no?
Yeah, so for example, in Yoruba tradition, there's certain groups that are, they'll say, well, our family worshipped Ogun because Ogun governed their, you know, patriclan. So that entire clan is, you know, that carries that energy in a greater degree than a neighboring clan who's, you know, quote unquote, worships Yemoja. That doesn't mean that every single person in that clan, they're a child of Ogun, but it's just like physiologically, you can see the phenotype in a certain patriclan where you can look the parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent going back generations, and you look at a picture from the 1880s, and then you look at, you know, a teenage boy now, and they have the same phenotype of the great-great-grandparent from the 1880s. They're different, but there's a certain energy that was passed on that they still have. So it's the same thing with the energy complex. They'll, in general, they all move in a certain direction where that whole clan is more like a fiery warrior type clan, where some other group may be a clan of artisans and sculptors and so forth. Even within the artisans and sculptors, you have some people who are more like warrior artisans and sculptors, and they're ready to go to war. But you have this whole clan where they are more prone towards creativity, artistic innovation, and so forth. And another clan that is more warlike because their whole clan is, you know, colored by that energy complex.
All right, that answers that question. I had another one though. It was something that you mentioned when you were answering the last person's question about prisoners of war, and you had kind of went over it real quick, but you said there was a certain reason why you don't kill certain prisoners. What reason was that?
Okay. So now, if you were, it depends on how it came about that they became a prisoner. Now, there's sometimes if somebody's invading your land and they should not be, you know, you can do whatever you need to do. But if you were trying to dominate their culture, or you were trying, for example, amongst the Asante people, the reason why they became Asante, so Akan is the large ethnic group, you have the Asante people and so forth, who is a subgroup, they're the largest Akan ethnic group, and then the next largest is Fanti, and then you have the Akwamu, which is us. But the reason why they became a federation is because before they were strong enough, before they became a very dominant Akan warlike group, there was another group, the Denchara Akan people, who were dominating the Asante people. And sometimes you get a ruler who becomes very egotistical and they get, drunk with power, and they want to not only rule over a certain nation, but then they want to embarrass them and, belittle them and so forth. And they were sending out decrees. The king was sending out decrees like, you need to send your women over to the palace so he can have sex with them, and cutting off the fingers of certain messengers when they came to the palace, just trying to degrade and belittle the Asante because they were too weak to take on the larger, Denchara Empire. And if you're living 2,000 or 1,000 years ago in this region, and you've been there for hundreds of years, and now there's a greater empire that developed, and they're dominating you, it's not like there's anybody you can call. You're either going to move, and you don't want to move from your ancestral land or where your ancestresses and ancestors are buried. So you can either move, but you don't want to do that, or you're going to be under their domination until you can figure out a way to overthrow them. They're a vassal until you can overthrow them. There's nowhere else you can go. It's not like you can call somebody and say, come get them off of us. So the Asante didn't want to move, but they ended up developing a confederation of different groups, and they all came together, and then they rose up and destroyed the Denchara, and they became, the larger group. But prior to that, they were being degraded, belittled, basically bullied and so forth. So if the Asante were to capture one of the Denchara warriors, they wouldn't mind selling them because that's their enemy. They were cutting their messengers' fingers off and sending them back in a brass pan just to say, don't mess with us for no reason. So if you capture somebody like that, they didn't care. But if you were doing something you shouldn't be doing, and you capture some people, and you kill somebody, their spirit can come back and cause you a lot of problems because that was not a justified, killing. So you don't want to invade a place, kill a bunch of people, and think that you're just going to relax and continue to do what you're doing, because those spirits are going to plague the people, cause disease, cause accidents, cause miscarriages, all kinds of things, because it wasn't justified. You didn't have a normal war and the best, clan won. You were trying to do something criminal and corrupt and so forth, and that's going to come back on you.
So that's kind of like what people consider to be like a haint spirit.
Yeah. The way it's that expression of it that they typically focus on, yes. You have the kind of spirit who is a quote unquote troubled or, kind of violent spirit because of the way they transition sometimes. You don't want to, just like you don't want to do something to somebody living if you know the repercussions for that. If someone transitions, that spirit is not going to be a nice spirit. They're going to be, for example, if you could be driving in the car, all it takes is for you to take your eye off the road for 2 seconds, and then you can crash into something. A spirit can simply distract you and cause a crash just for 2 seconds. You could be, reaching for a glass and they just nudge you a little bit, and then it breaks and cuts your, artery, and then you're bleeding all over the place. There's so many different kinds of things that can happen, and they don't have to be super powerful. They can just be a distraction that leads to miscarriages, bad financial decisions, breakup in relationships, illnesses, all kinds of things, because you did something very negative, and they're not going to allow you to just get away with that.
Okay, well, how long would that process go on for? Like, would that be like your entire life, or is it temporary? Is it, you know?
It really depends on the nature of the spirit. It's just like we can always relate it to something physical.
Hmm.
If somebody, was hanging around the neighborhood like a homeless person, transient, they'll keep breaking into houses until somebody does something about it.
Hmm.
So if you don't do something ritually to, repel this kind of spirit, they'll keep coming back if they see that you don't have anything, just like a homeless person, they decide if they want to keep harassing somebody or that somebody steps to them and puts them in their place, they'll keep doing it. Some of them will, some of them is on their whim. But if you were doing something very negative to somebody and they transition, that spirit is hanging around, you don't have a lot of leeway because you put that negative energy out there in the first place. And the
Hmm.
abosom are not going to help you get rid of that spirit because it was your fault in the first place. So they're not going to block them from harassing you and making you suffer the consequences of what you did, that was out of harmony with order.
Yeah. And the creation of that kind of spirit is not limited to just human beings, right? It can be any kind of animal or life form in general, right?
Right. In fact, since you mentioned that, let me pull this up.
That was my last question. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so um, there was one particular, there's an article that we published a while back. And just so you can see a visual of what Jojo was talking about. And he talked about, it could even not just be a human being, but animal and so forth and plant. And in the animal realm, it's called a sesa in the Akan tradition. So let me pull up this. So we were talking about diet and so forth, and we touched on this. Just give me 1 second. I have to find it. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can also type, in the chat room as well. Okay. Okay, so we wrote this article about ancient Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit African associations of divinity and purification with refraining from the pig as well as other animal flesh. And a coffin text from Kemet talking about Obatit of the evening, you swamp dwellers, you of Jedet, you of Perwajet, you of the shade of Ra, which knows not praise. They say, do you know why Rekit was given to Heru? It was Ra who gave it to him in recompense for the injury in his eye. It was Ra, he said to Heru, pray let me see your eye since this has happened to it. And Heru's eye was injured in the fight with Set. And he basically said, behold, my eye is at that first blow which Set made against my eye. Hold on 1 second. It said, it was said he assumed form against him as a black pig. Thereupon he shot a blow into his eye. Then Ra said, the pig is an abomination to Heru. So they were talking about how the pig became an abomination of Heru and how the pig became an abomination as far as you don't consume pork and so forth. Then they start, we quoted from later when the Greeks invaded Kemet and they were talking about how the Egyptians see the pig as an abominable animal and all these different things. But there's a portion in the Rudu in Heru's so-called Book of the Dead. A portion of the text says, this chapter shall be read by a person purified and cleansed, who has not eaten animal flesh or a fish. And here's the part that there's a link here that you can read the whole section. That says belief in Sasa, its implications for flora and fauna conservation in Ghana. So traditional Ghanaians, including Akan, have a strong belief that some plants and animals have special spirits, Sasa, which when cut, as in the case with plants, or killed, animals can bring serious harm to the person. Thus, such plants and animals are not eliminated. So you go to a sacred tree and so forth, and you just cut it down, then the spirit that animated the tree is now going to cause you a number of problems. Or you kill a certain sacred Achinibwa animal totem. Once the animal is killed, then the spirit causes you a number of problems. This is why you see people leaving offerings at the base of a tree before they cut a branch off, or, engage in ritual practice before they, kill an animal and so forth, because they know what can happen with a Sasa spirit, and they don't want to court that kind of, negativity. Same thing can happen with the individual. Says, do these angry spirits only come back to harass the person who harmed them, or do these spirits also harass others whom did not harm them because they are angry? It depends on the nature of the spirit. This is a human being. So, and they transition, and now their spirit is outside the body, of course, disembodied, but it's a human being. So, just like you have some human beings who are very, justice-minded, they will only attack those who attack them. But then you have some people who are, imbalanced, and if they're angry, whoever's in the vicinity, they'll come after. People like that. When they transition, they don't automatically become, spiritually cultivated. They have that same mindset, and they will attack in the same way. So just like you deal with them in person, and some people are, mentally imbalanced. They're mentally ill. And so they lash out and attack whoever's in their vicinity because of that imbalance. And that imbalance isn't always just physical. Sometimes it's a spiritual imbalance that manifested in the physical. If they don't, it's a disalignment from the spirit with the Akra, the divinity in their head. So if they have a disalignment there, whether they're living in a physical body or they transition, if they're disaligned from the Kra, then they will manifest that spiritual imbalance. So then you have to, defend yourself, protect yourself against that. So it depends on the personality and the level of spiritual cultivation of that particular individual.
So, like with the level of corruption carried out by this nation in general, there's like billions of these spirits at this point, right?
You said this nation? Say it again.
I said with the level of corruption carried out by this nation, I mean, there could be billions of hate spirits at this point, right?
Yeah, there hundreds of thousands, millions, because of course some people reincarnate. So even if they were that kind of spirit, then they came back. But yeah, there are many of them hanging around. This is one of the reasons why in a real culture you have funerary practices, so that you can make sure the spirit that transitions, your relative and so forth, you assist them in transitioning to the ancestral community. So that's where they dwell, instead of hanging around earthbound and causing problems for everybody. And that's just in general, even before you get to the kinds who are criminal. So when you have funerary practices that we call Aye and Akan, that's a way to keep the, the nation or the state free from a bunch of discarnate spirits just hanging around. Just like if you went to a certain area in a big city and you have a whole homeless, population, like 40 or 50 people in a certain area just roaming around homeless and drug addicted and so forth. If you live amongst that, at some point, they're going to cause you problems. If you do something to deal with mental health and poverty and homelessness and help get them off the street and clean them up and they can begin to work and everything else, then you remove all those people off the street so they're not causing problems for other people. But if you just leave them out there, they're going to cause problems. The same thing with spirits. When you have a funerary practice, you help to move them from that to living amongst the ancestral community so they're not earthbound and causing problems. Of course, in a nation like America, there's, they're full of criminal spirits. And then some of us, we're not protecting ourselves because we fell into fake religious practice like Christianity and Islam and everything else. So we forgot about on the surface, we forgot how to deal with those spirits from our side, as well as protecting ourselves against, you know, these corrupt white ones as well. Even though the white ones don't have much sway over us because we have our own Nsamafo to protect us from that, but sometimes one can slip in here or there. Okay, I want to switch over real quick. And just to check out and look into...
I think you have one more question in the chat, Quasi.
Hold on 1 second. Okay, said I've eaten meat for a number of years as a result of being miseducated, but I've not eaten meat in the past few years. What ritual do you recommend for us to be released from the participating in torturing animals by eating them as a result of ignorance? Oh, well, no, in that case, you don't have to, like, it's not a situation where you need to engage in ritual for that kind of spirit, that kind of sasa spirit from an animal. In that case, it's more so what would have happened with what the butchers are doing. Like, you didn't kill the animal, you know, McDonald's butchers, you know, they're killing the animal. So that spirit is not going to come after you because you were doing that. It's the people who are taking these animals and killing them in mass and doing all this other kinds of stuff. And the way it's kind of hitting back on them is, you know, cancer and things like that didn't used to be, you know, popular. Now people just accept that, oh, cancer is something that more than likely you're just going to have. That wasn't a popular thing. So a lot of these people who are, you know, these industries and people engage in these practices and so forth, that's coming back on this population. The white population is at negative growth, meaning they're not even at replacement levels. There are more of them dying than being born. And part of that is, you know, a reflection of what they've been doing in the environment with plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth. They're bit by bit being wiped off the planet. Now we need to assist and celebrate that process, but that's what's taking place.
Kwesi, I had a question, please.
Okay.
My question was, it was kind of along the lines of what the gentleman and the young lady were asking. How do we come into alignment with nationism and if we've been participating in things like dissexuality and drugs, like, is there a ritual process or what would be the ritual process to correct that to get into alignment, or is it just, you know, you made your bed, you gotta lay in it?
Okay, let me, I'm gonna show you this. So on our publications page on our website, for those who are unaware, the Nhoma page on our website, we've published 31 books so far. You can download all of them for free. So here's the page and you'll see all the books. But this particular, when you click on the cover, it'll either open up the book itself or it'll take you to the page for the book. Because some of the books have their own pages and you do that. So this book, the Okra Complex, the Soul of Akan Fo. So this book is talking about the nature of the soul, the divinity that governs the head. And if you go to the end, and this directly relates to what you're asking. So in Akan, the deity that governs the head region is the Okra for males, Okra for females. And Yoruba, it's the Ori Inu, the inner Ori, the inner head, and so forth. And Vodun is the Selido. So at the end section, we were talking about when we engage in disorder, which you're mentioning, disorder behavior and so forth, whatever it is, and make ourselves repulsive to Nyame Wa Nyame, the Great Mother, Great Father, Supreme Being, the Abosom, the Akan term for deities, forces in nature, the Nananom Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our spiri-genetic blood circle, and our Akra, Okra, soul, divine consciousness. So when we engage in disorder, you make yourself repulsive. It's like two magnets on a table, the like polarities facing. If you put one next to the other one, it repels. If you engage in disorder, you make yourself repulsive to the spirits that govern creation, that are in harmony with order. You make yourself repulsive to that. We say if you continue to dwell in disorder, your okra is repelled, similar to the repulsion of two magnets being placed together on a table with the same polarities facing. So if you consciously continue to engage in disorder, it's one thing to be a child and you were conditioned or corrupted into certain behaviors, or you're brainwashed into certain things and so forth. But if you decide, I'm just going to keep engaging in disorder, even though I know it's wrong, I'm just going to keep doing it because I'm following the whites and offspring. They said you can do whatever you want. So if you consistently keep engaging in that, you're going to repel the divinity that governs your head. So we talk about the possibilities of what happens when Nekra Driani, his kra or her kra has left her or him. One, the individual can face imminent death. Two, the individual will not die, but will manifest permanent odaim. Odaim, well, odaimfo means madness, mental illness, insanity, psychosis, like schizophrenia, different things because the divinity left the head. Three, the individual will manifest extreme antisocial behavior, like externalized odaim. They could be murderers and everything else. When the divinity leaves the head, and it's permanent, that can happen. So, but within that, and you look in the book, is the flip side. If you were conditioned to engage in self-destructive behavior, drugs and theft and all kinds of stuff, and you're suffering the consequences, and you decide you want to change your direction, we realign with the divinity that governs the head. That's part of that process. Realigning with your Nananoma Samafo, realigning with the divinity that governs the head. So some people were molested as children. Some people were conditioned to practice crime and, steal and rob and everything else, and they suffered the consequences. Some people got involved in drug use for one reason or another. A number of different things that have happened, but you can realign yourself. And we're not talking about people who consciously and deliberately rape and murder. They just need to be exterminated. So there's no redemption for that. But for people who were pushed into self-destructive behavior and engaged in that for years, realignment with the Okra, and this whole book is about the nature of the Okra, the soul, divine consciousness. That's the first step towards realigning yourself and repairing yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so of course, for those who are unaware, we produced our documentary film last October. That was our second documentary film. And this is you can go to our website on YouTube, Odwirafo on YouTube, and you will see we put the film out for free. We also have our Hoodoo Cast podcast, and there are podcast episodes, and you could join our Patreon group and so forth. But we put the film out for free so you can, we wanted people to have access to it. So at first we were, people paid for access to the film. We were doing it that way. Now we just reverse the process. You can watch the film first for free if you would like to support us by joining our Patreon group for $7.77 a month. You can do that. And you also have access to our 40 online courses and discounts on other courses and different things like that. So the thing is, it's a free access to the film on our page. Odwirafo on YouTube, you can subscribe to us. You don't have to subscribe to watch it. You can just watch it. It's an hour and 45 minutes. But we start off talking about our book, Rekit Hena Speret. It's a very short introduction. In that book, we talk about the etymology of the terms religion and spirit and how both of those terms are found in the language of ancient Kanit and Kemet. Okay. And we also show quickly in our book, Kuputuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. We talk about ancestral religion, including hoodoo. We also, especially for us in North America, we need to understand that whenever we talk about religion, first of all, the term religion and spirituality are really the same term when you're talking about real religion, ancestral religion, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit religion, African ancestral religion. It's the fake religions that are not congruent with spirituality. So we show, for example, in our book, Kuputuntun, that Jesus is a fictional cartoon character that they corrupted from images and aspects of the cosmology of Heru, and you see Heru and all set and so forth. And Kensu and Mary became Jesus and Mary, and Jesus and Mary and so forth. Muhammad, the waters of the northern Nile, the spirit that governs the waters, Mu of Hatmet, the northern Nile, became Muhammad, corrupted into a fictional cartoon character, Muhammad, who never existed. We show that the deity Ptah in ancient Kemet was corrupted into Buddha in, Buddhism and so forth. We show that the moon divinity, Yao or Yahweh, became Yahweh and so forth. So Yahweh, Allah, Buddha, Brahman, Jesus, all these characters are fictional cartoon characters that never existed of any form or of any race. So they have no bearing on the Hoodoo tradition. That includes people talking about the Psalms, has nothing to do with Hoodoo. The Bible itself is a corrupt, fraudulent book, and they stole different fragments of text from ancient Kemet and included that in the Bible and so forth. And all of the cosmologies of ancient Kemet, they took fragments to manufacture stories and so forth. So all of that is fraudulent. So there's no such thing as, well, we have our tradition and we respect Christianity and Islam and Judaism, Hebrewism and Hinduism and Buddhism. As long as they respect us, we have no respect for that because it's all fraudulent. And in our book, we expose how these fake characters, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Moses, Aaron, David, of course, Allah, Yahweh, Muhammad, Buddha, Brahman, Jesus, all these characters, Yeshua, all these characters are fiction, fraudulent. So we show, our, when we studied and put these books together and so forth, we went to the source, of course. First, the source, of course, is ancestral religion and practice and our Nsamanfo ancestresses and ancestors. But of course, at some point we did make those travels to ancient Kemet, Egypt, ancient Khanit, Nubia, and so forth, as well as Ghana and so forth. But we start off talking about so we're talking about the term Undu. When we talked about that earlier, Undu, Nduru, that's the first part. We show the information in the text and so forth. And we go into some detail about that. Hold on, I want to make sure I get to that. All right. So if you look here, we mentioned that early. Odwirafo, Odusinfo, Odutofo, Odumafo, different ritual practitioners in the Akan language. Odwirafo is a root worker. Odusinfo, root doctor. Odutofo, one who poisons and so forth. Odumafo, a diviner and so forth. So we're still using the terms Undu. It became Hoodoo Yefo, Hoodoo Mafo, Hoodoo Sinfo, Hoodoo Tofo. We're still talking about Hoodoo people, and we continue to call ourselves Hoodoo people when we came to North America. So that section, we not only define the term, Undu, but we also show that we never stopped using the term, and we came over here and we continue to call ourselves Hoodoo people as well. We show some of the imagery when we went to Ghana, ancestral homeland for Undu Hoodoo, but we went there specifically to go to specific spaces, rivers, ritual spaces to reconnect to the land. It wasn't about going, and we didn't go to a shrine to go get initiated and bring a tradition back. That's not why we went. We went to connect with the land where our people once walked and were buried. And even when we come back to a space, if we lived there hundreds of years ago and we transitioned and our children and grandchildren were taken into North American enslavement, the body that you once lived in is still buried in Ghana right now. So you can end up going to that village and finding that space, or going to that region where your body was once buried and you're back for the first time in hundreds of years. When they see our people, they see one of their ancestors or ancestresses who was sent away hundreds of years ago, returning in the flesh. So we went to specific sacred rivers that are sacred to our clans and so forth to engage in ritual practice to reconnect with our ancient Nsamatha. There's this section we're talking about the term kanche. So kanche, we wrote an article called Akan, origin of the term kanche or conjure. So the kanche man or kanche woman, the conjure man, conjure woman. Again, we were identifying ourselves as Akan people. The kanche man, ka means to speak, utter, say, or tell, and ache means to come forward, as in the coming forward of the sun. So the kanche is ritual incantations to bring the spirits forward. That's what kanche means in Akan. It means the same thing in ancient Kemet. The kanche man or kanche woman is the conjure man, conjure woman, and later conjure man and conjure woman. And they thought that we were simply mispronouncing an English term, but we were really saying the kanche man and kanche woman. And also identifying ourselves when we say, I practice kanje, I'm an Akan person. We have an interview with Dr. Katrina Hadgett, who wrote the book Mojo Working, which is a good true historical book on the unfolding of hoodoo in North America from the time we got here until things began being corrupted by Europeans and selling all these products, the marketeers, as she calls them, and so forth. So that's her book. We encourage people to purchase that. Then we get into the mojo, which is moja in Akan. And the nature of the term moja in Akan means blood, specifically the matriclan blood and the matriclan deity associated with the matriclan blood. The moja bag or the mojo bag or the blood bag is the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus that's shed during menstruation and so forth. So the ovum that's in the mojo bag is literally inside the womb of the woman. That's why it's the moja bag or the blood bag and so forth. We go into linguistics and cosmology to prove that. We show Abdena, Setchima, and ancient Kemet, or in Akan is the same as Bedat and Setchima, the Sekhmet in ancient Kemet. And she governs menstruation in Akan. She governs menstruation in ancient Kemet. And one of her titles in Kemet is Setchima, Sekhmet or Setchima. In Akan, one of her praise names is Tobia. The root is Tobi. She's the one that governs menstruation, governs that menstrual blood or menstrual moja or menstrual moja or mojo. And her praise name in Akan is Tobi, Tobia. The root is Tobi. And this is why the mojo bag or mojo hand is also called a Toby hand, because it's named after the divinity Tobiah, who governs menstruation. So that's a very detailed Akan cosmological reality that if you didn't know who Tobiah, who is Setchima Abinan Akan, who governs menstruation, if you didn't know that, and she's the one who governs the Moja or the Moja bag or Mojo bag, you would have no understanding about why Toby is a title for a Mojo bag. They start looking in the Congo language for these different terms and trying to put things together because they don't know who these deities are. And they don't know the cosmology or the language. So in this section, we had Mama Candace, and she was talking about ancestral possession, communication. We were also talking about a number of different things, and that's from the Hoodoo podcast, Hoodoo Cast podcast, where she was talking about how, you know, she had ancestral shadow possession and so forth. Her mother's transition, but she's talking about how that ancestral shadow possession took place. Then we talk about the Ja, which is later called the Jack or the Jack Ball, which is the Patrickland talisman. And in Akan, you have the ritual Ja, as well as the economic Ja. That is the Jack or Jack Ball in Hoodoo. So you have the Moja, which is the Mojo bag. You have the Ja or the Jock or Jack Ball, which is the, you know, Patrickland talisman. Second. So we give an example. You see an example of a quote unquote Jack Ball. And then you can see, just like the physiological Moja bag or Mojo bag is the endometrium that carries the ingredient placed in the bag that's ritually impregnated. Just like the ovum is ritually and physically impregnated and is in the physiological Mojo bag. You'll see that the Jack Ball at the end of a string or, you know, piece of leather and so forth is the Patrickland talisman, and it represents the epididymis and the testes of the male, and inside that bag is the genetic material physiologically inside the Mojo or the Jack Ball or Jack or Ja is ritually impregnated, and it carries the energy of the Patrickland deity that governs the person's Patrickland, whereas the Mojo carries the Matriclan energy of the Matriclan divinity. There's a female divinity that governs the Matriclan, a male deity that governs the Patriclan, the Moja and the Ja is the Mojo and the Jock or the Jack, the Matriclan talisman and Patriclan talisman. Without a knowledge of Akan ancestral religion and culture and language, you would never know there's a relationship between the Mojo and the Jack. But we have to prove that through our culture. We show here that just like the Akan people, of course, in North America, in the Akan language, Undu, it became Hoodoo. In Jamaica, Akan people practice Obayi or Obey. It became Obeya, Obia in Jamaica. In Guyana, Akan people were forced into Guyana. Their ancestral religion is Komfa. That comes from Komfo or Komfoa. In Suriname, the Akan people practice Winti, as they call it now. That comes from the Akan term, Quinti. And Suriname is Winti, and Akan is Quinti. This is an image from Suriname. So you have Akan people in different places. They're all using Akan words to identify their Akan ancestral religion, just like we do in North America. So we make that comparison just to show that. And I just want to show these, you know, the film is different segments. So we just want to show the different segments. Haint, mentioned earlier, Hinti in Akan and Henti in ancient Kemet. Same term, same meaning in North America and Hoodoo as it is in Akan, Hinti, and Henti in ancient Kemet, because we migrated from ancient Khanid and Kemet, Nubia, and Egypt into West Afuraitkaitnut, West Africa, and then we were taken from there and brought into North America. So of course, all these terms that we have in Hoodoo, of course, they're all Akan terms and are fully defined in the Akan language, just as they are defined in Hoodoo. But of course, they came from ancient Khanid and Kemet, so we can look at the Medutu, the hieroglyphs, and find the exact same terms: Mojo, Jackball, Haint, Undu, Kanche, all of them. Second. And we even talk about this notion of Haint, blue. You find the Haint blue representing the sky as well as water and so forth, painted on certain houses. It's connected to spiritual transformation. You see that same blue color in the shrines in Ghana and so forth. And when you go into the tombs of ancient Kemet, you'll see that same blue color is on the ceilings of the tombs in Kemet, connected to the female divinity Nut, who operates through the atmosphere, and the stars are in her belly and so forth, and she's shown as blue. But you see that same association. And we had Sister Nijma Assad talking about cleansing the okra. And the question earlier about, realigning yourself with order. If you were engaged in self-destructive activity, you start by cleansing the okra, and part of that process that we never stop doing is going to the river and engaging in ritual purification to cleanse the spiritual head. So that's what she's talking about there. In this section, we're talking about the Komfwa, which is a class of priest or priestess. Here in Ghana, that's the Komfwa. And Komfwa was the one who gets possessed by the divinities and so forth. You see that same spirit possession in North America. And it's called Akom. So in the Akwamu dialect, that kind of priest or priestess is called Komfo or Okomfo. In the Asante dialect, they're called Komfwa. The diphthong at the end is Komfwa. We just saw in Guyana, the whole tradition is called Komfa, that comes from Komfwa. In Hoodoo, it became Gofwa or Gofa, the Gofa doctor who has the Gofa dust and so forth. That's the Komfwa doctor with the Komfwa dust and so forth. So we still have that class of priest to priestess. And this is one of those Gofa doctors who has the Gofa dust and so forth in North America. We talked about Adanko and Adankowa, the male and female hair in Akan culture. In ancient Kemet, it's a male and female divinity, and the animal totem is the hare that becomes the rabbit in North America. Adanko and Adankowa and Akan on the continent, the male and female rabbit. And this notion of the rabbit's foot being a sacred talisman, it comes directly from the divinity Adanko, male, Adankowa, female. And when you look at the stories in Akan culture talking about Adanko, he's a shapeshifter, he's a medicine, root work and so forth. And in Akan language, when you read the stories about Adanko the hare, he's the one that has the den, undu, which means the strong, undu, or hoodoo, the strong medicine. So he's a hoodoo, he's a Odun Sinifo, he's a root doctor. In Akan culture, he continued, as well as she, as a rabbit, the rabbit's foot in North America. That's the animal, that's the rabbit's foot. But this is the female divinity from ancient Kemet, Adankowa, and you see the little hair as the symbol on her standard. Ancient hare divinity or rabbit divinity, sacred animal totem. Sometimes she will be shown as a hare, or sometimes as a woman with a hair standard on her head and so forth, showing she's the, the spirit that governs that complex of energy, and the sacred animal totem is the hare. So we continued that in our Akan culture and also in North America. So we also get into Kakaru and Jama Kakaru, which became to be Jama Kakaru or Johnny Conqueror, to High John the Conqueror and so forth. So what we show here is that there was an individual named Inyama or Jama, Akwamu lieutenant, forced into North America during enslavement, or really into the Caribbean, St. John's Island. There was a great revolt by the Akwamu people on St. John's Island. In 1733, they took over the island for 6 months. And Jama, King Jama, was the head of that revolt and so forth. And they were running the island until, other troops were brought and there was a war and they put the revolt down. But they committed suicide instead of, being captured. And his spirit went into the spirit of the Jama, the plant, the Kakaru plant. And let me just show you what that. So in the records, and we show this, we did a whole article on this, and we highlight that article in the film, Jama Kakaru. The name of the individual was Jama. The plant, which is ginger, is called Kakaru. Kaka means to bite, but it also means to rub. So undu means medicine. So Kakaru means the biting or chewing. Kaka, undu, medicine, Kakaru. It also means the rubbing. Kaka, undu, medicine, Kakaru. Kaka also means fierce, ferocious, irrepressible. So you eat that fiery root and you become fired up and irrepressible and ferocious. So Jama Kakaru came to be pronounced Johnny Conquerut because the Danes called him Joni, Konge Joni, even though they knew his name was Jama. And we show in one of the documents, they'll say that the natives called him King Jama, but the Danes called him Joni. They corrupted his name. So Jama Kakaru came to be pronounced Joni Conquerut. And in the Asante dialect is Kaka Duru. We mentioned before, Undu is Akwamu, Unduru is Asante. So the Kaka Du or Kakaru, the chewing medicine, the biting medicine, the rubbing medicine. I'm rubbing my root, Johnny Conqueror or High John the Conqueror root, rubbing root, chewing the root and so forth. Kakaru, the chewing, Kaka, Undu medicine. Rubbing Kaka, Undu medicine. Kakaru, that's in the Akwamu dialect. Johnny Kakaru comes from Jama Kakaru. In the Asante dialect, it's Kaka Unduru, or Kakaduru. So Jama Kakaruru came to be pronounced Johnny Kakaruru. Johnny Kakaruru comes from Jama Kakaruru, Kakaduru, or Kakaruru. So we have the entire true story of the man, the root, how it came to be the ginger root and so forth, why in Akan is named Kakaru, why later on the jalap root was replaced the ginger. So now people think that High John the Conqueror root is the jalap root that people sell and so forth. But in reality, the original root was the Kakaru. The jalap root comes later. So, and then we talk about how Okufo Kwabena, as well as other people from the Caribbean, when they came to North America during enslavement, Denmark VC, they brought that knowledge of Jama Kakaru with them. But Jama Kakaru, or Jama, he is an Akwamu Akan ancestor who waged war and took over St. John's along with his group for 6 months. And they committed suicide. So they weren't here for very long. They were here for about a year plus, waged war, took over, ran the island for a number of months, and then, they were taken down, but their legacy, still is imprinted in us. And he was an Akwamu Akan warrior, and he's related to Akwamu Akan people in North America by blood. So he is not some, myth or people trying to place him in different places, saying he came from the Congo and all these different places. We know him. We know his name. We still communicate with him directly. We know the root, why the root is called Kakaru or Kakaruru and so forth. All of it is Akan Ancestral Religion. Second. We had done an article about the Hoodoo doll baby, and it's the same Akhuaba doll in the Akan tradition, the fertility doll and so forth. We preserved that in North America. This one right here in the middle is the one that was found in the 1700s. It was called a slave doll, an African-American slave doll, and we got it from an auction. And they were auctioning it off as an African-American slave doll, but it was carved by one of our people hundreds of years ago. And we have that at our shrine. This is from Jekyll Island and Georgia and so forth. Another Akhuaba, Hoodoo doll baby and so forth. So we were just talking about that. And the final piece is, this is Amen and Amenet, the great mother and great father, supreme being, who are called Inyamewa and Inyame in Akan. But we were talking about the relationship between the different traditions, like Abosom and Akan, Orisha and Yoruba, Voodoo and Ewe and Fon, Arusi and Igbo, Ntoru, Ntoru, Nation, Kanid and Kemet. So we're practicing the same structure, but we have our own unique ways to express that in our cultures. We were talking about cosmology, and then we got into, for example, this is Ra, the creator of the universe, Ra-et, the creatress. They have their own names in our various traditions, and Yonkumpon and Yonkoton and Akan, and Odumare and Oshumare and Yoruba, Da and Ahuedo and Vodun and so forth. So we were talking about cosmology in that particular portion because we wanted to show the nature of the Hoodoo pantheon, the pantheon of divinities. We also, show that the Akan people have this cosmogram as well that a lot of people associated with or assume that this is from the Bakongo people. There are a number of groups that have this symbol. Akan people call it the Aakhuamuman. It's representative of the soul. It's a gold disc that is worn around the necks of those who cleanse the soul of the sovereign and so forth. But it's a sacred talisman for Akan people. And you can see it in the solar parhelion, that sacred structure. When we looked up in the sky and saw the solar parhelion, even though we were over here enslaved, we recognize our ancient symbol, and we continue to utilize that symbol in our culture. So, the final portion, we're talking about the deities of the 7 days of the week, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, and how we're named after them, like Kwesi and Kojo and Kwame and Abenan, Afua and Akua and Ajua and Yao and Ya and Abba and so forth and Kofi. In our Akan culture, there's a 7-day week, and we're named after the divinities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern that 7-day week. What people are unaware of, and we'll just share it like this. When you look at something from a newspaper in the 1700s, 1800s, they're talking about an enslaved person who ran away. His name was Kojo. And you also see, like in South Carolina Gazette in the 1700s and so forth, when they're selling people, they'll say, we have a slave from the, Gold Coast, and her name is Adjua, and we have another one named Kofi, and another one named Kojo or Kujo, another one named Yao, another one named Kwame, another one named, Kwesi, and so forth. These are all Akan soul names based on the day of the week that we're born and the deity that governs the day. But the most important part is when you see this, you see evidence of the Akan Hoodoo pantheon. Kojo is someone who's governs the divinity. Ajo governs his head, and he's born on Monday. If it's Ajoa, that means she's born on Monday, and the divinity who governs the moon, Ajoa, governs her head, and so forth. So when you see Kofi and Kwame and so forth, let me show you the list real quick. So when you see Kwabena, Abena, Akua, Kweku, Kwaku, Yao, Ya, Aba, and so forth, and it's based on the deities and the days of the week, that's proof that our tradition survived and the Hoodoo pantheon, the pantheon of deities, survived. If you're calling someone Kofi and Afua or Efi or Essi and so forth, you're invoking the divinity that governs their head. And when they utilize that in their ritual practice, they're invoking the divinity that governs their head. Those names are not just, hey, these are Akan day names, and if you're born on Sunday, your name is Kwesi if you're male and Essi if you're female. All the writers who talk about slavery and so forth, they'll say that. Well, the Akan people preserve their day names, and that's why you see names like Kwesi and Essi. That means an Akan male and female born on Sunday. What it means is an Akan male and female born under the direction of the deity Awusi and Essi, who animates the solar orb. So if you're Kwesi and Essi and you're born on Sunday, Awusi and Essi govern your spiritual head, and those are deities you invoke on that day of the week. The fact that you see Akan day names up until this day, like Efi, Kwesi, Jojo, Ajua, Abena or Benna or Benni, Kobena, or also Kobe, and so forth, that shows that we preserve the Hoodoo pantheon. So there are gods and goddesses of the Hoodoo tradition, and the central pantheon of the Hoodoo tradition are these divinities, and these are the Akan sculptures. These are their manifestations in ancient Kemet. These are the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern them, and these are the 11 major body systems that they govern within us. Okay. So I just want to go through that quick run through of what's in the film. Just so you can see, when you check out the film, you see what you're looking at. But, okay, so any questions on that, or if you saw the film or any other information that we have touched on, or a question that you had, maybe something that we didn't touch on? And you can either place it in the chat room, or you can unmute yourself. And I also want to show you this. Oh, okay, you said you watched both films and they were both informative. Okay, yeah, I'll say we appreciate that. So in the film, there are certain excerpts that you'll see, and you saw a couple of them there from our podcast. We did 7 episodes, and we're going to start that podcast back up this season. The Hoodoo Cast podcast for Authentic Hoodoo. Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. So it's on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music and all of that. Also on YouTube. So you'll see our Hoodoo Cast podcast page. These are all the episodes that we put out so far. The first one we did in New Orleans with Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau. Not this past March, but previous year, March. Then we went to Philadelphia with Dr. Katrina Hazard. Then we were in Washington, D.C. with Nijma Assad, and back in D.C. with Mama Candace. And then we did a few solo episodes to, drill down on specific cosmological topics. But we're going to get back into podding once a week and releasing these episodes once a week. But you'll see that some of these excerpts from some of these are, in the film that bolster that aspect of the cosmology that we were talking about. But you can see all these on YouTube, but they're also on, streaming platforms. Okay. All right, so if there's no questions, we're going to go ahead and end it here. We appreciate everybody for joining with us. Now we're going to have our upcoming Etchy Sign conference, and we're going to get back to, we normally would have our conferences in person. We started doing, virtual conferences, during the whole COVID epidemic. And then afterwards, sometimes we did something in person. Sometimes we did them virtual. Like the last couple of Hoodoo Mayn festivals, we did virtual. Then before that, we did one, in person like normal. So, you come out, you have presenters, vendors, and so forth. We're going to get back to that. So our Etchy Sign conference that's in March, we're going to get back to the in-person conferences, and we'll let you know, we'll update you on that, but we'll have vendors and presenters from the different traditions that'll be coming up. It's always around the spring equinox every year. That will be our 10th annual Etchy Sign conference as well. Okay, so you had a question about the manhood course. So that is on the Odwiraman page on the website. So when you look at odwirafo.com/Odwiraman, you'll see a link to the archive course. When you scroll down, you'll scroll down on the page so they can download the book, but also the archive course is available there as well. Let me put that link in the chat room right quick. Oh, you're talking about for the young men? Hold on one second. Hold on a second. So that's the Heru core. I want to make sure I have the right link. Okay, let me put this. Okay, so this is the link right here. Okay, matter of fact, that's JoJo's course. JoJo, is that the same? Is that the link that they should go to on the Facebook page?
They can either message that page or they can message me directly. It doesn't matter either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, yeah, you can go directly. Let me make sure that.
I've got to fix my my website, so it's better just to go to Facebook.
Okay, so it's the Heru Core. Facebook.com, the Heru Core, all one word. That's the one. And that's the manhood training for young boys from like 10 to 17. So we have the Oberima Afurakani manhood for men, 17 and older into adulthood, but then we also have for 10 to 17. And then just also for those who are unaware, if you look at our page, Obatain Sem Ama Ma'ati, she taught the 13-week training intensive for women, Obatain Sem. You can access that archive course as well. And you can download the book Obatain Afuraitkaitnit Womanhood, but she taught that course and the archive is available. And the book is a free download. And the page is, if you just Google Obatain Afuraitkaitnit Womanhood, you'll see that. Okay. So one more question about finances and so forth. So when you're dealing with that, so there's a couple of things. Of course, on any question as far as direction with regard to what direction your life should be taking and so forth, it's always about what is your function in the world, what are your specific talents and potential and so forth. When you look at the book, The Okra Complex, free download, we talk about not only what we have received genetically from the mother and father, but the patriclan and matriclan divinities, their specific inclinations that people have because they have a specific energy complex that's unique to them. Some people are naturally inclined towards that energy complex that deals with engineering and building and so forth, and they're governed by a divinity that governs that. Some people are naturally inclined towards, plant life and mineral life and healing and so forth. Some people are naturally inclined towards artistic creation, and they become graphic artists and so forth because they have an energy complex that governs that, divinity that governs that. Depending on what your energy complex is, the abosom that govern you, you'll be naturally drawn to the specific area of life where you express that, and you can
you got your Optimus Prime, huh?
have entrepreneurial, endeavors associated with that.
Cool.
What you so it starts off with learning who you are, dealing with the okra. We talk about the cleansing of the okra. We also have our course dealing with susu or meditation, but finding out who you are, what your spiritual anatomy is, aligning with your function in the world and so forth, what you came into the world to do. And that's written into your own craft and communicating with your Nsamafo, and then you are naturally drawn to a specific, areas of endeavor that you can express that fully. But it always starts off with that. Any, what direction should I take in life and so forth? It always goes back to what is your function in the world? Why you came into the world to execute this specific function? What kind of energy complex are you born with, that you incarnated with, that's conducive to that function? And then you can look at ways to turn that into an entrepreneurial, endeavor. Okay. Yeni Asera. Okay, so we want to say Yedase to everyone who participated. We're going to put this up on YouTube as well, so people can get that information and begin to, you know, correct the record as well as starting to incorporate things. And one of the things that we talk about with regard to the Hoodoo tradition, the reason we have the HOODOO MAYN Festival once again is to focus specifically in October on Hoodoo as Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. But then once again, as we said in March, we have the Sign Conference where we bring the various traditions together, so people can see different expressions. But when people see what we're doing with HOODOO MAYN and reestablishing our ancestral culture, our spiri-genetic culture that has been inherited intergenerationally and transcarnationally, and see that we reestablished that. And let me show you one expression of that reestablishment. So Hoodoo Jase Dine, as we mentioned, is the hearth shrine of Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. So that is our shrine house. And you'll see, you know, what we talk about with regard to that and how we established our Hoodoo Jase Dine or shrine house and so forth. But when people see what we have done with regard to reestablishing our culture from within our blood circles, and we're not dependent on anybody outside of our blood circles, whether here or on the continent or in the Caribbean or South America or Central America, for our ancestral religious practices. When they see it, we have firmly reestablished our traditions, that will encourage them to look within their family and reestablish their tradition. It's not lost, it's in your spiri-genetic blood circle for you to unearth. So if you're Fang, if you're you know, practice Wanga and so forth, if you're Ovambo ancestrally, if you're Igbo, if you're Gola, if you're Kisi and so forth, you can look within your blood circle, and your Nsamafo, your ancestral spirits, would direct you to people within your blood circle or information that came from your people in your blood circle. They may even push you towards an article that was written in the 1800s about one of your family members and what they were doing, you know, ritually and so forth. They will pull and prod and push and make sure you get in contact with those individuals and that information so you can re-establish the practice that has always been part of your blood circle. So part of what we're doing is not only talking about hoodoo and engaging in that practice, and it governs the way we rear our children and medicine and education and business and, you know, politically amongst one another. When we talk about a body politic, we're talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, governs every aspect of our lives, but it should also encourage others within our community to look within their own blood circles and unearth their ancestral religious traditions that it's been there the whole time, that's just been suppressed for a period, covered up lightly for a period. Okay, so Yedase, we want to say thank you, Yedase, for everyone for tuning in. And Yebeshi Abio, we will meet again. That's it.